bugbears. But the wolves, I think, are being reintroduced to the climate somewhere. I think, but I guess.
Are they?
I think so, but you'd have to be behind a fence, wouldn't you? I know we obviously you're not on to talk about this, but it's nonetheless it's probably the most compelling story out there at the moment. Where are the links?
It may be more interesting than the UK politics at the moment, that's for sure.
Well, indeed. Well, Rachel Reeves is probably quite happy that we're talking about links and not the economy. There's a link, and it's one of those situations where she gets accused of legging it for the hills because she's gone to China. Look, I get it. We can have some mischief with her foreign trip. It was penciled in a while ago. I think the Governor of the Bank of England is with her as well, and various others that know their way around a spreadsheet. But it's obviously not a good look when the person in charge of the economy isn't there when the economy is going down the Swanee.
I guess so, but the trouble I always think of being in the top job in a department is that you are always the person that's seen as the face of the department. So in this kind of situation, they're not going to send someone like maybe Darren Jones, who's obviously also senior in the Treasury. He's not going to be the person who's going to be seen as the statesman, the person who goes overseas. That is always going to be in Rachel Reeves's remit. So in this situation, although the timing is really bad, there probably was actually little choice. If she was going to cancel the trip altogether, it might have been really difficult to try and find another opportunity to actually make that trip happen. And then she would have been in other sorts of difficulties. So I do think that is always the curse, I suppose, of being the person at the very top of the department, because even though you have a team of people below you, these kinds of things are always going to be in your remit. Yeah, absolutely right. And it's going to be a tough time, right? I mean, even if, you know, Labour, and they will obviously claim they have a grander plan, inevitably they are talking about global components that are out of their control, particularly what's happening in America. But it's safe with us, will say Rachel and Keir. But either way, even if that turned out at some point to be the case, it's not going to happen next week, is it? There's going to be rough times ahead for the Treasury. Yeah, absolutely. And I think Labour have said that from the start. They've said that this is going to take some time, and that is something that lots of the public have not been particularly happy with. And I think the reason for that is just because of the political context. People are really fed up, and people are quite desperate at the moment compared to maybe 10 years ago, say. People just want something to change now, and lots of people can't afford to wait, I suppose. So I think that's why the likes of more anti-establishment parties who are maybe making those quicker promises is more appealing at the moment than maybe it would be. I think, you know, give a different economic and political backdrop and tell people, oh yeah, we have to wait 5-10 years for something to get better. Lots of people would be okay with that because they are already baseline level fine. But I think when you're saying to people who are really desperate and really struggling, oh, well, hold on a little bit longer, it's really hard for people to hear. Indeed. Let's talk about something slightly different here. Elon Musk. Who would have thought that he would be so regularly popping up on current affairs and political agendas? But he's absolutely put himself right in the thick of it, rightly or wrongly. I mean, it's a bit bizarre, it's a bit weird, and some say it's a bit dangerous, with apparently our security services looking into, you know, what he's up to as well. But he's reportedly holding private talks about removing Keir Starmer, fearing threats to Western civilization. I mean, is it that bad that Mr. Musk, the man behind Tesla and rockets, has got to try and unseat a democratically elected government, even if you don't like them? I mean, it is quite fascinating just how much interest Elon Musk seems to have taken in UK politics, particularly after the US election. It seems to be his main focus. I mean, if you go onto his X account, pretty much all of his posts are to do with either reform in the UK, ousting Keir Starmer, Jess Phillips. I mean, he's taken this really active interest, and it has, I think, made a lot of people just think, why the UK? I mean, there's so many countries with interesting political issues at the moment. Why have you kind of honed in on us? But I think this is interesting because, yes, he's saying he's having these secret talks, but I don't really know, who are these talks with? And I wondered that. Yes, with who? Yeah, with who, and who actually would Elon Musk be able to harvest the power to actually remove Keir Starmer? Of course, Elon Musk is really influential, and him, A, being so wealthy, and B, also having the control over a huge social media platform is super influential in politics. But is it enough to actually remove a democratically elected prime minister? I'm not sure. And I think it'd be interesting to know kind of who these talks are with.
He's also had talks, Mr. Musk has streamed a discussion with a German politician, Alice Fitzgerald, who's known as pretty much a hardened right-winger. I know that term we can often use very loosely, but you take the point. That sparked a backlash from Germany's Vice-Chancellor and opposition as well. So it ain't just us. Spanish MP as well, Pedro Sanchez, has warned Musk's actions could enable fascism, calling them attacks on institutions and democracy. What a funny time we're in.
It is a really weird time. It's so interesting to think that, 5-ish years ago, when you think of Elon Musk, you think of him as the kind of spaceman and maybe the Tesla man, just about at that stage. And now he's this really political figure, not just in the US but globally. I mean, he seems to be more of a political commentator / campaigner at the moment than he is anything to do with his kind of tech and space endeavours that he became so well known for. So I think it's really interesting how he's pivoted that way.
He certainly has. And Britain is back under union control, says Kemi Badenoch. Teachers could strike as union rejects what they call an insulting 2.8% pay offer. Kemi Badenoch claims Labour's education plans show that it's unions that are controlling the party. She criticises Keir Starmer, stating he fronts Jeremy Corbyn's policies with union influences. She opposes, of course, Labour's child wellbeing and schools bill, which could restrict academy freedoms and teacher pay, as Labour look to sort of bring that back into central control. Although it was Blair's idea, of course, originally with those academies, that they should have their autonomy, as it were, much like a private school would.
Yeah, I mean, this is just going to carry on probably until the end of time. As a rule, the Conservatives and more rightward-leaning parties think that caving to the unions, as they'd say, is just only going to fuel further demands for pay that the government just can't afford. But Labour, obviously, traditionally, are more of a union-run party, and they always think that the best solution is, if a public sector is asking for more money, you give it to them, because they are kind of the pillars that hold our society. And that is an argument kind of as old as time.
Yep.
The growing issue with strike action had been getting so out of control over the past few years. Something had to happen, whether you agree with paying them or not. There had to be some kind of action taken, because there was this weird feeling towards the end of the last government that just nothing was happening. It was just getting worse. I mean, the government ended up not being able to have constructive conversations with the union leaders. The union leaders then demanded even more. It just was getting a little bit out of control. So whether this was the right decision or not, there had to be some kind of action taken. I think everyone would agree with that, because the strikes were getting beyond. It's just
it was just crazy, wasn't it? It seemed like we were back in a weird time when everybody was downing tools. Just a very final one to finish on, Alicia. Keir Starmer claiming that he's found the ultimate deterrent for immigration problems, record migrant deportations. He's saying under his time in office, 16,400. He says that's more effective as a deterrent than schemes like Rwanda. I think it's a little bit wobbly on that equivalence that he's drawing there. And I would imagine if under 6 months in office, if 16,000 people have been deported, a good chunk of those, the case would have been already in the system by the time they reached office, because these things don't take like a day to process. They take months and sometimes years.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I mean, and as we very well know, these things have been taking years and years. I mean, that backlog that has been piling up and up and up, that we've heard so much about over the past kind of year or so, I mean, that's accumulated over years. So, I mean, all of this takes a really long time. I think what's interesting, though, is like the term deportation, because that was often used when talking about the Rwanda scheme. It was, we're going to deport migrants to Rwanda. So I think to try and kind of draw a parallel and say that what you're doing is very different to the Rwanda scheme, I think maybe a different choice of language.
Yes, I think so.